He lies still in the palace at Jericho, a king surrounded by marble and incense. But the air smells of rot, and then he whispers his final command. "When I die, kill them all." The room freezes. No one dares ask who he means. But Herod the Great's voice cuts through the air. "Gather the elders of Israel. When my heart stops, slaughter them. Let there be mourning across the land, whether they mourn me or not." That was his legacy. A king who wanted to be loved, but chose to be feared. And here's the shocking part. This wasn't a madman's last outburst. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent poisoning his own world with suspicion, betrayal, and blood. Jericho's palace had grown quiet. Once filled with feasts, soldiers' laughter, now only whispers echo through the marble halls. Outside, the desert wind hums like a warning. Inside, the servants walk quickly, eyes down, praying not to catch the king's gaze, because everyone knows. Herod's dying, and yet even now his commands can kill. He is barely human anymore. His flesh burns, his legs swell, and his body leaks a stench that makes even his guards recoil. But his mind remains sharp, venomous, calculating. He can feel the decay beneath his own skin. He can smell himself dying. And still he plots, because Herod cannot imagine a world that moves on without him. He's ruled Judea for over 30 years, a kingdom of stone and blood. He rebuilt the Temple of Jerusalem, carved fortresses into mountains, raised entire cities from sand. And yet when the people look at him, they see a Roman puppet, an outsider, a pretender. That humiliation haunts him more than any illness. It's what drove every act of cruelty that followed. Herod's story begins not with glory, but with fear. The fear of being unwanted. The fear that no matter how much he builds, he will never belong. He was not born a royal. His father, Antipater, was an Idumean, half Jewish, half Arab, a man who clawed his way into favor with Rome. From the start, Herod learned that loyalty was currency, and betrayal the price of survival. When he seized the throne in 37 BC, it wasn't through inheritance, it was through blood. His rival, Antigonus, was dragged before the Romans, beheaded with an axe, a punishment reserved for slaves. And from that day on, Herod ruled not as a king of his people, but as a king for Rome. To the world, he was brilliant. To his people, he was a monster in a golden crown. At first, he tried to win them. He lowered taxes, built temples, fed the hungry during famine. But the more he gave, the more they despised him. They called him Herod the Idumean, Herod the foreigner. That rejection curdled something inside him. He began to see betrayal in every shadow. Even love became a weapon. He married Mariamne, a Hasmonean princess, descendant of Israel's royal bloodline. To the world, it was a union of power. To Herod, it was proof that he could belong. He loved her deeply. But in Herod's world, love was just another thing to fear losing. And that fear would soon consume them both. As he lies dying now, staring at the ceiling of his palace, he remembers her face. The one he had ordered killed. The only person he ever truly loved. And that's when the fever begins to rise again. The itching starts beneath his skin, an agony no ointment can soothe. Servants apply oils, but it burns like fire. He claws at himself until his sheets are stained with blood. The physicians whisper, terrified. They've never seen a sickness like this, and it's only the beginning, because Herod's body is about to mirror his soul, rotting from the inside out. Next time, we descend into the illness itself, the disease that made Herod a living corpse, and how a king's paranoia turned into the most gruesome death in ancient history. Before Herod's flesh began to rot, his heart already had. Long before the worms, there was love, and the murder that followed Mariamne. Her name was whispered like a prayer throughout Judea. Young, beautiful, royal blood flowing through her veins. She was everything Herod was not. Pure, beloved, legitimate. To him, she was salvation. To her, he was the man who had drowned her family in blood. Still, he courted her, promised protection, gold, and power. And when she finally became his wife, he was obsessed. So obsessed that when he left for war, he left her under guard, with a chilling order whispered to his uncle, "If I fall in battle, kill her." Because if he could not have her, no one would. Years later, that order came back to haunt him. Rumors spread. Mariamne had grown cold, distant, perhaps even resentful. Whispers turned to accusations. Adultery, treason, witchcraft, no proof, only fear. And fear was all Herod needed. He summoned her to the palace, trembling with rage and heartbreak. Mariamne stood before him unflinching, silent. Witnesses say she spoke no defense. Perhaps she knew it was useless. When the guards dragged her away, Herod turned his back. But later that night he broke. He called her name again and again, demanding she be brought to him, as though he could reverse what he had done. For days he wandered the halls like a ghost, his voice echoing through the palace. Mariamne, Mariamne, but she never answered. Her death marked the beginning of his madness. The first real crack in the illusion of control. He executed her mother next. Then his two eldest sons, accused of plotting against him. It didn't matter that they were innocent. In Herod's world, innocence was irrelevant. Loyalty was temporary. Even Augustus Caesar, the most powerful man alive, joked grimly, "It is safer to be Herod's pig than his son," because at least a pig, by Jewish law, was spared the slaughter. But the joke was more than wit. It was truth. Herod's paranoia was devouring his family, and soon it would devour him. By his middle years, Herod's reign was unmatched in splendor. He ruled from the Mediterranean to the desert. His area, Masada, Jerusalem, each monument a defiant cry, "I exist, I matter, I will never be forgotten." He was Rome's favorite client king, an architect, a visionary, a political survivor. But in every feast, every ceremony, there was silence behind the applause. The kind of silence that hums when everyone is too afraid to speak. He could sense it. The smiles that didn't reach the eyes. The courtiers who bowed too quickly. The tremor in every voice that said his name. He had built an empire of obedience. And in doing so, he had killed the last voice that could tell him the truth. When his body began to fail, no one dared to say he was sick. When the pain came, no one dared to tell him it was mortal. Even his doctors feared him more than they feared death. They prescribed baths, herbs, and bloodletting. They whispered about imbalances of humors. They prayed the king's fury would not fall upon them when the remedies failed. But nothing worked. Each day his body betrayed him further. Each night the pain crawled deeper. He began to smell decay, his own. And here's the part no one could speak aloud. His disease was not just physical. It was divine, some whispered. Punishment made flesh. By now, the palace stank of incense and death. His servants couldn't stand near him without gagging. They spoke of seeing shadows move where no one stood. Some swore they heard Mariamne's voice echo through the corridors at night. Whether ghost or guilt, Herod was haunted. He screamed her name in fevered delirium, clawing at his chest, begging her to forgive him. Even as he ordered new executions by morning, the man who had once built empires from stone was now building his own tomb. And every brick was laid with paranoia, grief, and pain. But it gets worse. Much worse, because the disease that would destroy Herod the Great was unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. It would twist his flesh, rot his genitals, and fill his body with worms while he was still alive. Next time, we enter the sick room, and what happened inside will haunt history forever. Jericho. The winter palace glows beneath the desert sun, its marble halls gleaming like bone. But inside, behind drawn curtains, lies a stench that no perfume can mask. The king is dying, and his body is turning against him. At first, it was only a fever. Then came the swelling. His feet bloated until his sandals burst. His legs ached as if fire crawled beneath his skin. He blamed the air, the heat, the food, anything but fate. The physicians gathered around him, men in fine linen, trembling with fear. They offered oils, baths, tonics of figs, and honey, but nothing soothed him. The swelling crept upward, and soon his abdomen distended grotesquely. They drained him of blood. They fed him bitter roots and pomegranates. They prayed to every god they could name, but his flesh only darkened. The smell, sweet and rancid, clung to him like a curse. Even his attendants, the ones who had sworn eternal loyalty, began to cover their faces with cloth. And that's when the whispers began, not of medicine, but of punishment. They said his disease was divine justice, that God himself had touched Herod with decay for the slaughter of the innocent, for Mariamne, for his sons, for the rivers of blood he had spilled in the name of power, and the evidence was undeniable, because soon the symptoms turned unnatural. His belly swelled like a corpse left too long in the sun. His breath carried the stench of death. His body leaked pus from open sores that no ointment could heal. And then came the worms, tiny white creatures that burrowed from his lower body, from wounds that would not close. Some accounts say they crawled from his genitals. Others, that they fed beneath the skin itself. Whatever the truth, the effect was the same. Herod the Great, king of the Jews, was rotting alive. The palace turned silent except for his screams. His cries echoed through the marble corridors like the groaning of some wounded beast. Servants fled their posts. Guards refused to enter his chamber at night. And the physicians, they stayed only because to leave meant death. They burned incense to mask the odor. They boiled linens. They poured wine into his wounds. But the infection spread faster than they could cleanse it. Herod's skin began to crack like old leather. When he moved, blood seeped through his robes. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. And yet, his mind refused to surrender. He ordered his courtiers to bring reports of the kingdom. Taxes, rebellions, trade. He dictated letters through gritted teeth, his voice trembling with rage and agony. He would not let death find him weak, but there were moments, brief, fevered moments, when the great Herod wept. One night, as the fever peaked, he demanded a mirror. The servants hesitated. He roared until they obeyed. When he saw his reflection, he froze. His skin was yellowed, peeling, his eyes sunken, his lips split and blackened. He stared for a long time, then smashed the mirror to the floor, and from that night on, no mirror was allowed in the palace. He tried everything. He bathed in oil and wine. He wrapped himself in linen soaked with honey. He ordered a diet of apples and dove's milk. He even tried the strange remedies of foreign physicians, powders of crushed pearls, the ashes of vipers and the blood of young men, but nothing slowed the rot. Desperate, he turned to the Dead Sea. They carried him there on a litter, his body shrouded, his face hidden from the crowds. The air was heavy with salt and sulfur. The same sea that swallowed Sodom and Gomorrah now shimmered before him like liquid metal. Herod believed its waters could heal anything. He ordered the servants to lower him in. The salt burned his open sores like fire. He screamed, a sound that echoed off the cliffs for miles. His guards turned away. When they pulled him out, his flesh was bleeding, blistered and raw. He collapsed unconscious. The cure had nearly killed him. But Herod refused to die. Back at the palace, he lay in bed, surrounded by gold and terror. His every breath was a rattle. His tongue swelled. He could barely speak, but still he schemed. He knew his death would bring celebration. The people he had ruled by fear would dance in the streets. He could not allow it, so he devised one final monstrous order. He commanded that the leading men of Judea, the elders, priests, and nobles, be gathered into the hippodrome of Jericho. And when he died, they were to be executed on the spot. That way, the day of his death would be remembered with tears, even if they were not for him. The guards hesitated. They whispered that the king had lost his mind. But Herod's gaze, even sunken and fevered, could still freeze a man in place. And so, the order was obeyed. Hundreds were rounded up and imprisoned, waiting for the moment their king's heart would stop. A heart that beat slower every hour. The worms still crawled beneath his skin. The fever burned through his veins. But Herod clung to life with pure hatred. Hatred of death. Hatred of those who would outlive him. He whispered Mariamne's name one last time, and somewhere in the palace, a servant began to pray, because everyone knew the end was near. Next time Herod's final days, the suicide attempt, the execution of his son, and the death that turned a palace into a tomb. He is no longer a man. He is a wound that breathes. The once mighty Herod the Great lies twisted on his bed in Jericho, the same city he once filled with music and marble. Now it's quiet, except for the flies. They gather on his sheets, on the cracks of his swollen feet. Servants move with cloths pressed to their faces. No one speaks his name aloud anymore, because Herod can still hear. And when he hears, he kills. The disease has eaten through him. His stomach bulges grotesquely. His skin splits in wet lines when he moves. A foul liquid seeps from his lower body, a mix of blood, bile, and rot. And from those wounds, the worms still come. Some nights he screams that he can feel them chewing through his flesh. Other nights he whispers to them, calling them his loyal subjects. The physicians are helpless. They stand at a distance, muttering prayers behind their hands. One offers opium for the pain. Herod throws it across the room. Another suggests fasting. Herod orders him beaten. They all know there's nothing left to heal, only to wait. But Herod does not wait quietly. Even as his body collapses, his mind sharpens with fury. Every thought circles back to one question: who will take what is mine? He knows his sons are waiting. Antipater, Archelaus, Antipas, each circling like vultures, each whispering to Rome, promising loyalty in exchange for the crown. Herod calls for Antipater, his eldest, the one he once trusted most. When the young man enters the chamber, he bows, but not deeply enough. Herod's eyes, sunken and yellow, narrow. "You think I'm dead already?" he rasps. Antipater opens his mouth to deny it, but the king raises a trembling hand. "I hear everything. I know your letters to Caesar. I know your plans." Antipater pales. He swears loyalty, falls to his knees. But it's too late. Herod's voice cuts through the air like broken glass. "Kill him." The guards hesitate. They glance at the dying king. Herod roars, a sound torn from the pit of his lungs. "Now!" And so, Antipater, Herod's last living son, is dragged away and executed. The sound of his scream carries through the corridors. And when it fades, the palace falls silent again. Herod stares at the ceiling. There are no tears, only the faint twitch of a smile. He has destroyed the last heir with his own hands. By now, the stench in his chamber is unbearable. No one but the physicians and a handful of slaves will enter. Even they cover their faces with wine-soaked cloths. Herod can no longer walk. He drags himself to the edge of the bed, gasping. He knows the end is close. He can feel his heart struggling, every beat a knife wound in his chest, and yet he cannot bear the thought of dying like this, helpless, humiliated, forgotten. He calls for his guards. They rush in, kneeling. "Bring me a blade," he orders. They freeze. He repeats it louder, spittle gathering at the corners of his mouth. "Bring me my dagger." One of them obeys. A short sword is laid before him on the bed. Herod's trembling hand reaches out, his fingers closing around the hilt. For a moment there is silence. Then a sharp cry. The guards lunge forward, pulling the weapon away. The blade clatters to the floor, streaked with blood. He has missed his heart. The wound is shallow, but the pain is immense. He collapses back, gasping for air. Even death refuses to take him. The news of his failed suicide spreads through the palace. Some servants pray he'll die before dawn. Others fear he'll live long enough to punish them. Outside, in the hippodrome, the elders of Judea still wait in chains. They know why they're there. They've heard the rumors that their deaths will mark the king's funeral. Some pray for mercy. Others curse his name under their breath. Inside, Herod calls for his sister Salome. She kneels by his bed, barely able to look at him. He tells her the order again. "When I die, you will slaughter them all." Salome nods, but she does not mean it. She has already decided. The moment he breathes his last, the prisoners will be released. Judea will mourn no one but the tyrant himself. Herod's breathing becomes shallow. The fever takes him in waves, dragging him into delirium. He mutters to ghosts, "To Mariamne," to his dead sons. Sometimes he imagines them standing at the foot of his bed. Sometimes he begs them to wait for him. His voice breaks into sobs that no one dares acknowledge. By dawn, he can no longer move. His eyes are open but unfocused. The worms are still crawling. The sores still ooze. A physician leans close to check his pulse and steps back immediately from the smell. The king's chest rises once, twice, and then stops. Herod the Great is dead. The guards outside hold their breath, waiting for the sound of executions in the hippodrome. But it never comes. Salome steps into the courtyard and shouts, "Release them! The king is dead." A murmur ripples through the crowd, then turns into cheers. The people of Jericho flood the streets, laughing, crying, singing. After decades of fear, Judea breathes again. Herod's body is wrapped in purple silk and carried to Herodium, the fortress tomb he built for himself atop a desert hill. It takes hours for the procession to climb the slope. The sun beats down on the golden bier, the smell of embalming spices fighting the deeper rot beneath. They seal him in his marble tomb with silver, myrrh, and gold, a monument to a man who tried to build eternity and found only worms. But Herod's story doesn't end there. His death left behind a shattered kingdom, a divided family, and a prophecy that would echo through time. Because within months of his death, in a small province he once ruled with iron fists, a new child was born, one the world would one day call King of the Jews. And though Herod was gone, his shadow still reached across history, the first tyrant in a long line of men who mistook fear for power, and found in the end that no throne can save a man from himself. This was Herod the Great, the king who rotted alive. The palace is silent now. Marble halls that once echoed with footsteps and proclamations of power are empty. The scent of incense lingers, a feeble attempt to mask the odor of decay that still clings to the chambers. Herod the Great is dead. But his death is not the end. It is a signal, a warning to those who built their lives on fear, manipulation, and blood. Inside the Herodium, the tomb he built so meticulously looms above the desert. It is a fortress for a corpse, a monument for a man who wanted eternity, yet could not escape the frailty of flesh. The embalmers, trembling and gagging, handle his body with care. The purple silk robes are soaked in aromatic oils. Layers of myrrh and spices are packed around the corpse, attempting to stave off the inevitable stench of rot. Even so, some parts of the body resist. The bloated flesh does not compress neatly. Wounds leak, and the faintest buzz of flies seems eternal. To the ancient eye, Herod's corpse is a paradox. A king adorned in gold, a conqueror of cities, yet reduced to the same biological fate as his peasants. No grandeur, no fortification, no monument can change that truth. Outside the tomb, Judea begins to stir. His surviving sons, Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip, gather, each clutching dreams of inheritance. But the vacuum Herod leaves is dangerous. Chaos reigns where terror once governed. Archelaus claims Judea, Samaria, and Idumea. Antipas takes Galilee and Perea. Philip governs the territories beyond the Jordan. It is a partition of the kingdom, but not a restoration of order. Revolts erupt within months. Roman legates intervene, weary of instability in this volatile province. Eventually, Archelaus is deposed and exiled to Gaul. The empire that Herod had striven to secure with loyalty, terror, and monumental architecture begins to crumble. Yet the most chilling legacy is not political. It is psychological. The palace staff, once cogs in Herod's machine of fear, now walk like ghosts. Many refuse to speak of the king. Some whisper about hearing his voice in the wind. Others claim that at night the scent of decay returns with the desert breeze, a reminder that Herod's tyranny, like rot, lingers. Even the historians who record his death are affected. Flavius Josephus, whose accounts remain the most detailed, describes Herod's final days with clinical precision, yet never without a shiver. The level of detail is so grotesque that readers cannot help but imagine the crawling worms, the distended flesh, the agonized cries. It is a cautionary tale, etched not in moral allegory alone, but in flesh and horror. Herod's burial is both pomp and grotesque irony. A golden bier, jewels, purple silk and incense accompany the procession. Musicians play solemn dirges. Professional mourners wail. But the people lining the streets, those who once feared the king, watch with grim fascination. Some even smiling. They mourn the spectacle. Not the man. The procession climbs the desert summit to the Herodium. The tomb itself is massive, built to house not only the king, but the ambitions of a lifetime. Inside, layers of stone and linen seal the body from the world. Herod's final resting place is a paradox, a fortress meant to immortalize a tyrant. Yet the rot of the human body mocks its permanence. Within days, the palace whispers that even the tomb carries a lingering stench. Centuries later, the tomb itself becomes a casualty of history. During the Jewish revolt against Rome in 66 CE, rebels destroy Herod's resting place. Stone crumbles, sarcophagus shatters, bones scatter across the desert. The ultimate irony for a man obsessed with immortality, even in death, his desire for eternal memory is denied. Yet the shadow of his life remains. The architectural wonders, Masada, the temple in Jerusalem, the harbor at Caesarea, endure. And with them, the paradox of Herod persists, a builder of magnificent structures and a killer of his own blood. A man who sought to be remembered as immortal, but whose true legacy is fear, corruption, and decay. Modern medicine confirms what ancient observers could only describe in horror. Chronic kidney failure, Fournier's gangrene, pulmonary edema, and infections that rotted living tissue all converge to make Herod's death one of the most documented and horrifying in history. The descriptions of crawling maggots, distended flesh, and the unbearable stench match modern pathology. The biological truth is terrifying enough, but it is amplified by the psychological dimension. Herod's paranoia, cruelty, and obsession with control turn his suffering into allegory. Every symptom becomes a metaphor, a decaying kingdom, a family destroyed, and a man devoured by the very terror he instilled. And yet, even in his decay, Herod's mind remained dangerous. He issued orders. He revised his will. He determined who would live and die even as the worms consumed him. Power, for Herod, was inseparable from life itself, even in its most grotesque form. This is the haunting lesson. No matter how tightly a tyrant controls the living, death and the inevitability of decay cannot be commanded. The ruins of his empire are scattered across Judea. The Herodium rises from the desert like a ghost. Masada perches over the cliffs, silent and defiant. The harbor at Caesarea lies in ruin, a reminder that human ambition, even when monumental, succumbs to time. Yet Herod's story continues to echo. Artists depicted him surrounded by demons. Medieval chroniclers described maggots devouring his flesh as divine retribution. And even today, historians, archaeologists, and writers return to the tale. It is a story of extremes, power and paranoia, genius and cruelty, ambition and decay. It is the story of a man who tried to defy mortality through terror, blood, and stone, and failed spectacularly. Herod the Great wanted eternity. He wanted his name carved in gold, stone, and memory. He wanted fear to outlive love, and monuments to outlast men. But what endures is neither gold nor temple. It is horror. It is decay. It is the reminder that even the mightiest king is mortal, that flesh rots. That ambition can never outlast death. Herod's life began with ambition and ended in rot. His empire crumbled, his dynasty fractured, and his body, once a symbol of power, became a testament to the futility of control. The lesson is simple yet unforgettable. Greatness built on cruelty and fear does not triumph. It decays, it corrupts, it dies, and history remembers not the immortal king he dreamed to be, but the walking corpse he became. A man consumed by his own terror and a warning carved forever into the sands of time. The worms are gone. The golden bier is dust, but the shadow of Herod's life and death lingers. And somewhere in the ruins of Judea, you can almost hear him whisper, "Control everything. Fear nothing. But remember, death is inevitable.